Hello, hello, lovely people. Welcome to another episode of Lunch Tech and Chat. I've got my friend Will here as usual, and today we're gonna talk about the hack on the Balancer V2 contracts. That's an
Yeah,
interesting topic, Will. Happened over the weekend. Can you update on what has been happening and going on? You know more than I do.
yeah. So just actually for those that are not familiar, um, Balancer is one of these very OG, really OG protocols. Probably one of the very first actually protocols in the DeFi ecosystem that actually came live. In the post ICO days, they I would say they came live more or less around the same time as Uniswap,
Mhm.
and 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 has been built. I mean, I have huge respect actually for the team that actually built that protocol, because they built at the same time as an AMM, like automated market maker like Uniswap, but they built a the original AMM was also like a multi-asset AMM, so it allowed you actually to be trading multiple assets in the same pool. So as at the same time as an AMM, as a asset management protocol, effectively, and built by a very smart group of people. Some of them ex MakerDAO folks that actually built that protocol, and yeah, over these last few days, so like during the weekend, after the weekend, it suffered an exploit on its Balancer V2 contracts. So it's very unfortunate, because some of these contracts is they have been around for a long time. So in a lot of them, as most of the versions of balance that have been launched in the market, they not only been around for a long time, but they tend to use some of the top, smart contract auditing firms around the world. So very unfortunate, but there was quite a significant kind of like drain on that exploit. It was like 120 million in losses across different chains, and there's still some
120
ongoing
million.
120 million
Wow.
dollars, yeah, of the exploit across several chains. So we can spend a bit of time kind of like unpicking what it is and what was the current state of like the analysis for some of like the auditing firms actually have happened. But one thing I can say that have already been found out is that the exploit, the smart contract that was used for the exploit, was impartially vibe coded. So and we can
So hang on. So the smart contract that got exploited was vibe coded,
no,
or the one that
one used by the
hacked it.
attacker, the one used by the attacker
Right.
to attack the
So the
smart.
hacker used vibe coding to crack the other smart contract to drain money out of it.
Yeah,
That
effectively.
is nuts. So they could have been like trialing this out for a long time until it
Very
actually worked, right?
there's a few things that actually the security firms that actually have analyzed this actually have already unpacked. These two things. So one was some of the code that was actually left in the like what I call like the in the console log instructions, which usually you have that in testnet or in dev mode, but when it comes to kind of like mainnet or production live smart contracts, you remove some of actually the console instructions that was left in the exploit code that was actually used. So that's a big indication that there was partly vibe coded and actually used AI actually for doing the exploit. And the second thing that also indicates that it has been planning for a long time is that the attacker used about kind of like used an account that had 100 ETH on it, coming from Tornado Cash. So for those that actually don't know, Tornado Cash is a well-known Ethereum mixer, which allows for someone actually to, put funds into a mixer, and then the funds effectively kind of like remove, kind of like protect the privacy, and then on the other side, kind of like retrieve the funds from a pool where actually funds are being mixed into a different address. But there was no recent deposit of 100 ETH into Tornado Cash. So that means that the attacker had used some old deposits, potentially some deposits that were from previous attack that they had done in other protocols, into for this attack this time. So yeah, a couple of indications there that there has been a planned attack for a little while.
Because the interesting thing is like now thinking like about blockchain, smart contract, and AI. If you're trying to exploit a smart contract, you can now have like a coding agent running 24/7 trying to exploit that contract, right? And because everything is in the blockchain, you actually have access to the source code of the smart contract, which
100%.
makes even easier for AI to understand the smart contract and the potential vulnerabilities, right?
100%. And I would say like probably the people that are the most well equipped to do any of those exploits are people that have previously or currently work in smart contract auditing firms, because they will know what are, I guess, common exploits that exist in smart contracts, and they will know also like some of the emerging exploits that they have found through their expertise dealing with complex code bases. So,
Or an ex-employee or something like
or
that, right?
an ex-employee of that also happens. Ex-employees that actually know some of the things that maybe the team kind of overlooked because thought that some particular vulnerability was not critical, and the teams
Or
teams
maybe,
do
or
that kind of stuff.
maybe, or maybe it's just the smart of AI. Like you put AI over the code, the AI will probably find more exploits or look into a way that the human wouldn't, because the human is doing based on experience, and
Yeah,
AI is like just looking at the actual code and understanding any
yeah.
breaches, and
Or
and
looking at
and, and
connections, yeah,
yeah,
looking at
looking at
connections that
connections.
humans couldn't find, or some of the tests that are commonly used by smart contract auditing firms don't necessarily pick them up. And some teams might simply, because some of the top firms actually, they are quite expensive, right? If you are a smaller protocol in your early days and you want to safeguard a little bit of money, and you don't necessarily want to contract some of like the top firms, even though actually Balance are always contracted top firms. So that's not a guarantee of success, right? Like they've always interacted with some of the top players like Holborn and Chain Security and guys like that, which are globally well known top firms, but they do cost. It's not cheap for some of the activities that they perform. But yeah, so effectively, kind of like if you mix both of them together, a well-trained auditing professional and AI that has like an agent that has been kind of like trained effectively by that well-known kind of like security professional, and on top of it, you actually ask the AI to go and look for connections that may not be picked up by traditional security tasks like static and dynamic analysis type of tests, or even like for some of the formal verification tests that it is usually done, then you could actually get the AI to find some very, very edgy cases that that can be exploitable.
That is crazy. These auditing, like the smart contract auditing firms, do you know if they give any guarantee, like if the smart contract gets hacked, like they'll give the money back or anything like that? Like,
No,
do they?
usually there's no
There's
guarantee.
no clauses on, because if they are auditing, they should be guaranteeing the quality and security of that smart contract, right? Like, is that no clause that the actual auditor gets impacted by the any of the results on exploitation?
Usually not. It's mostly like it's mostly a business of like reputation.
Mm,
So it's not like usually when a smart contract auditing firm, does a analysis, it makes a bunch of disclaimers on the fact that protocols they should seek second, third opinions from different smart contract auditing firms and the like. That it's that the work that they do is based on the best current knowledge of frameworks and existing exploits and all that kind of stuff that has happened previously, and that they have that collective kind of like wisdom that they have had over multiple analysis and the like. But there's no specific guarantee saying like if you lose say $100 million, we will actually give you $100 million.
mm.
I'm sure it's like some of these firms actually they subscribe to professional liability and that kind of stuff. But again, even professional liability, kind of like insurance, if you think from that point of view, you have limits on those types of insurances, and you also have clauses in terms of type of insurance. For example, like the insurance will pay out if it's based on, I guess, mismanagement or lack of best practices or whatever. But if all of the boxes are ticked, then the insurance, you can't say like this is professional misconduct or anything like
Do
that.
you
Because
know? Do you know the guys from Balancer? Like, do you still have
yeah,
contact
I
with them?
know actually this. I know the original founder CEO, and I also know the current founder and CEO, and the guys are just devastated. Like I sent them a message over this weekend, and like once I came back because I was away at the beginning of the week, and I found out, I said like, oh my god, because I personally onboarded these guys into the Maker protocol originally, and I have huge respect. Like the stuff that they built, it's really
So,
cream level.
what does that mean for what does that mean for Balancer now? Like, do you think that that's the end of Balancer, or do you think there's a way of them, sort of uh, like reigniting out of this thing?
I mean, Balancer is a pretty significant protocol, right? So they've had close to $1.5 billion almost of like TVL on the protocol. So I guess in relative terms, this is not I guess like 10% of the TVL. It's not like the world is ending kind of thing. And the interesting fact is that this was not from the latest versions. It was actually from a very kind of like a version that has been around for a long time. And assuming that hackers and black hat professionals are out there constantly seeking for edge cases of how to exploit a protocol, it it probably took quite a bit of time in terms of preparation
Mm.
for a hack of this magnitude, and in an old contract. But it's not only that; it's the fact that some of these open protocols, like AMMs, they have multiple forks of them. You remember you and I, Andre, like back in the days we
Back
did
in the day,
just
yeah,
back in the day we did we did just for the fun of it, kind of like a fork of Uniswap just to test it out the code. So
yeah.
there are multiple there are multiple kind of equivalent forks of Balancer V2 in the market,
Hmm.
and therefore all of them actually also have the inherited the same flaw
Oh,
that is on mainnet. right?
Yeah,
So
that would be nuts because then the guy would know, whoever did the hack would know how to just search those other protocols and hack them out.
absolutely. I mean, if they are significant enough in size, then
So if you
most likely
and
happen.
this is probably a more of a technical question for the people listening to us. So if you have a smart contract, that smart contract is being used, there's some money that is allocated on that smart contract, let's say as an investment, people put the money is being used to generate interest or anything like that. If you find yourself a exploit on that smart contract, how do you transfer everything from one to the other? Because in the normal world outside of the blockchain, you would just patch your API or your logic or your application, and then you're adding the securities on it. You can't do that with smart contracts. Smart contract, once you deploy, it's that version. You need to create a new version. How do you move the stuff from one version to the other? How do people deal with that?
Well, usually, yeah, it's not exactly um, not exactly true, and most smart contracts have a little bit of that. So, like the smart contract, that specific version of the smart contract is immutable, right? But in usually what protocols and builders in Web3 they do is that they deploy a smart contract that is what we call like a proxy pattern of a smart contract, which is essentially you have an implementation code, right, that you have deployed, and then you have like a proxy behind it, which effectively manages and orchestrates the implementation of that code base, right? So if you have to do security patches or changes on a particular code base, you can effectively deploy a new implementation, new logic contract on top of an existing one. And then the contract that it sits behind, it still stores all of them, all of the values and the balances of the original values and the balances in the wallets that actually held on to that money, right? It's
But you
just
can't access that smart contract anymore.
you
You're
you
accessing you're
you
accessing
no,
the
because
funds on it
the
through the
storage
new one.
the storage stays, like, so the storage of the address and balance it stays on chain, stays the same. All that actually the proxy does is actually deploys a new logic contract, therefore fixing a patch, for example. If there was the one ones I I haven't looked into the balancer one, if they use that proxy pattern, but it's very commonly used by projects, and usually there's like I guess a governance around it where you deploy a new implementation, like a new logic contract using that proxy pattern, but actually the mechanism through which that is deployed is a kind of like a governance vote of some sort. So, for example, like the governance of a protocol votes that that new deployment will fix the patch, and sometimes there's emergency governance activity that happen as well there.
And let's create another situation here. So let's imagine someone exploited a smart contract and they starting to drain funds out of it. How do you stop? You can't. It's in the blockchain. You can't turn it off. You can't pause it. So
Yeah.
what would you do from a security perspective if you know it's happening? How do you stop it?
So you could, so some, again, depends on the protocol, but would have like to look at that specifically on the functionalities within the balancer one. But some protocols have a holding kind of function that can pause kind of further executions for whatever kind of like emergency risks that they have there. Most tend not to use that kind of like that pause function. You have that commonly you have like in stable coins and stuff like that, you can actually you deploy a pause function, and therefore kind of no more transactions can happen where it uses the logic of that smart contract, right? So in the case here, you can effectively, again, through a governance mechanism, say like we deploy the governance kind of like requests, I guess, authorization from its community to execute that pause function on that smart contract, so it prevents further drain of funds from existing wallets, right? So that's usually how people done. I mean, for example, within MakerDAO, there has been historical kind of emergency moments where the protocol had to execute some of these emergency functions, right? For example, during a flash crash in the market where, Dutch auctions were not processing as efficiently as they should be, and that kind of stuff, there were deployments of like emergency functions into the contracts. It's usually that they are like this. They're used for emergency. They are not functions that are executed every day by some of these protocols.
Interesting. Really interesting. All right. Anything else we want to cover today?
Yeah, no, I think it was more like I think found interesting the fact that a protocol that has really kind of like been around for such a long time and has served a big portion of community had still this kind of edge attack vectors
Yeah.
applied to it, which which essentially allowed for that kind of like manipulation of. It was based on like a one of the things here. It was actually there was a rounding error in the way that actually was calculating the decimal points on the kind of like having what you call like a dust of amount, and that was actually based on the mismatch between that the amount that was actually locked in the protocol and the amount that was actually effectively on chain. The attacker could manipulate like through a very like a significant series of swaps, manipulate the fact that there was actually a rounding error in the way that actually the contract calculated things, and then execute that on a loop several times to be able to drain funds from a lot of accounts based on that mismatch. It was part of
Probably
it.
probably a lot more complex than that, but yeah, it
Yeah,
makes sense.
but there was actually there was that plus the what we call like the manager, like the function that we call like the manager of the user balance function
Hmm.
was actually executing around that. The attacker could mimic the that the sender of the transaction was actually his smart contract that he had deployed rather than the actual user and the owner. So there's actually was actually an access control problem plus the rounding error on the way that the protocol was actually calculating balances and actually manipulated those two in a live scenario over loops of swaps and across different chains as well, because the same contract was managed almost like through a factory and it was actually deployed across the different chains. So it actually could do those loops not only on one network, but across several networks at once.
Do you think that that's gonna impact the usage of like Uniswap, PancakeSwap, other sort of like mass usage applications with a bunch of smart contracts? Do you think people will, what's the word, be a bit more careful when they're using smart contracts from now on? Do you think that's gonna change in any way the way that the end user interact with smart contracts?
I don't necessarily think I don't necessarily think that those things actually they are long lasting trust problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there has been several exploits, right, that have occurred over the last 8 years, and the exploits getting effectively bigger and bigger and bigger, right, in terms of size, right? Like when when I started my career in Web3, an exploit of 2 to 5 million, we would really kind of have sleepless nights.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, some of these exploits, because the protocols are also getting quite significant in size
Inflated.
themselves,
Yeah.
they are like, 100 million. Like there was at the beginning, earlier this year, there was actually an exploit on Bybit, but it was like more like a centralized exchange. It was a 1.5 billion actually exploit, right? So it's like, was it? Yeah, I think it was about a billion, a bit over a billion. I'm more forgetting a little bit like the figure now, but it was in the billion. So the exploits are getting more significant. So I think the key lesson from all of this is not necessarily that's it, called DeFi. DeFi is dead. I don't think it is, because they have occurred that every time that there's a new exploit that happen in the market, in the same way as traditional security, right?
Mm-hmm.
As security becomes, like people build more things with
Yeah,
software
I think
over time,
whereby
there's a resilience as well because new things are known, and then new attack vectors are covered, and then maybe some of the existing money that were in particular honeypots, they kind of like distribute themselves across different protocols, and then there's kind of like I think about these things nowadays much more like in the way that a biological organism actually functions, right?
mm,
Instead of saying like, if there's actually someone is sick and there's a bunch of like, I guess, cells being attacked, right? There's antibodies that are created to try to protect the human or the animal for survival. The same thing actually happens here. Like every time that there's a little like an exploit or a crisis or something like this, yeah, there's a loss of immunity in the system for a short period of time, but eventually the antibodies kind of they are developed around that, and they build more resilient bodies. And if like imagine like a baby as it grows into a toddler and then into a teenager and into an adult, it develops more and more kind of that and becomes more and more resilient. And I tend to think it's very much like this. So honeypots then are distributed, which with it exploits, and then they move around and they build patches around that kind of stuff. The new protocols come to life because of that, because they're trying to solve those patches.
yeah, I think where my question is coming from is like if you're dealing with like a finance company or a bank or whatever, and some sort of exploit happens, the liability is on the actual business, and me as a customer, I won't be impacted. As of if I'm using a protocol, depends like if it's a like a what's the word that I'm looking for, like if it's an actual company that has terms and conditions that are covering me, or if it's like a DAO, like make a DAO or something like that. So if something happens, I'm gonna lose my money and there's no way of getting that back. As of if I'm dealing with an actual company, the liability is not on me. So my risk is on the investment, but not on the security of
That's
something that I have zero control over.
that's not true either, because there's limitation on the liability as well on the company, right? Depending on which part of the financial market you're involved. So, for example, if you have your funds and you're investing, let's say, in the stock market, right?
Mm-hmm.
And generally people invest into the stock market through a broker, and then the
Mm-hmm.
broker hire custodians, etc. If there is a significant loss of funds, either due to a hack or due to mismanagement and other activities that make that the broker or their custodian, more specifically, can like go belly up during that crisis, there is a limitation on the money that you can recover. It's not going to be 100%. You have priority in the insolvency process, but most of the time it's going to be capped. That's part of like the litigation process, right? The liquidator will pay based on some insurance that have been set for the users, but it will be capped. If it's a commercial, if it's a broker, it will be, but like in the United States, it's a SIPC covered, which I think it's capped at $250,000 if I'm not mistaken. If it's a commercial bank, and say you have more than, like in Australia, New Zealand, and in other jurisdictions, if it's a commercial bank, you will have deposit insurance on your funds that is by individual or by company, and it's capped at $100,000. So if you have $1 million, you're still going to lose actually 90% of your money in a litigation, in a
Yeah,
liquidation.
but you're talking about a whole liquidation of the company shutting down. I'm
Yep.
talking about like one hack. Like let's say
Mm.
my money is in the bank, my account get hacked through the bank security systems, and my money get drawn, then the bank is responsible for my money because they are the custodians. As of if I have my money, I don't know, like in Pancake Swap, and it
Yep.
gets hacked and my money disappear, there's no one for me to complain about.
No, but there has been. I mean, this is part of like maybe kind of more evolving set. There has been protocols that have been set as insurance protocol pools. So that effectively, if you have one of the most well known of these is called like Nexus Mutual. So you could, in the same way that you would have like an insurance, you could kind of like subscribe to like a premium with like a protocol, and you decide what is the size of your cover, right? And you have like to pay kind of like a regular premium into that, and then that builds an insurance pool effectively. And then if you, for a reason like the protocol that you're interacting with was part of the hack, you could recover at least a
Part of
portion of
the
the total, or the totality of your money back if you had that in premium set up. It's just
Hmm.
the difference here is that, for example, in a security hack, instead of being you having like the bank doing that on your behalf, it's you doing your, I guess, insurance cover, right? But you're, regardless of whether it's through one mechanism or the other, you are paying that security insurance through the fees that you pay the bank.
Yeah, yeah.
Just that the bank is doing that at the back and like having that security insurance contract with someone in the back office and charging you the fees for having that reflects on either your mortgage or the things that you might have like with the bank.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
but it's just that it's a little bit like, because it's, I guess, self-custodial and permissional in that space, you also have to be conscious about these
Yeah,
different
I think the difference
factors
is
of
once you
risks.
go into some of those DeFi's or on-chain solutions, you've got more control over what you're doing in a sense,
Yeah,
but you don't have control over what has been built. Of course, you can audit yourself if you understand enough,
yeah,
but not everyone is a developer or technical enough to understand what they're doing, so they're just going for the servers. But the
100%.
risk and the reward, of course, in the chain, you're probably going to have more reward, more interest in something that you're investing. That's the whole thing in the blockchain. That's why people are drawing to the blockchain, but then the risk is higher as well. So people need to have that balance of risk and reward when they're doing stuff like that. I think that
100%.
that's sort of the message.
100%. Yeah. I mean, people
And
need
we're
to be
not
aware.
financial advisors. Like we're
Yeah.
just
No, no, but like,
commenting, we're just commenting here what we know about it.
but on the tech side, definitely, because you have to be. I mean, as we say, like in DeFi, like code is law, and it literally is in this case. So if also, like, I guess the bank, like, says that you choose to interact with, meaning the protocol that you choose to interact with, has an exploit, you have like you being able to judge a legal document. You have to be able to judge in some aspect the the solidity of the code that draft your relationship between you and the protocol.
and
Right?
you're developing in Solidity.
Yeah, and you're developing solidity, but like the how robust that is, right?
Yeah,
So you have
how
to be able
solid
to
is your
how
Solidity
how
code?
solid it is your solidity in the development of like that smart contract. And sometimes, to be honest, like, for example, this is why I wanted to make an episode on this one. This is an OG protocol, right? So it's at the same level as Aave, Maker, Curve, and all the other guys. It's like it's a big significant protocol that has been around for a long time, and the code that was on this version has been also around for a long time, years. So sometimes it might take years until some sort of like exploit appears. We have this thing that we tend to use, not only in Web3 and blockchain based kind of applications, which is the Lindy effect. Is like the longer a code base has been around, the less vulnerable to hacks it is, and it's partially true, right? And it tends to be mostly true. I mean, like, Maker didn't have like significant exploits. Curve hasn't had significant exploits. Uniswap hasn't had significant exploits. Have been around for a long time, right? But the longer it is, but that also has hiccups in that road sometimes of building
Yeah,
that
it is
Linda.
true, but it's not because maybe they find an exploit on something, and now that exploit is applicable to a bunch of things that have been built on
Exactly.
that something, like operational systems or any other things like TPK. I was going to say internet protocols like TCP, IP, anything like that. Like you
Yeah,
find it and you can attack a bunch, right? Like it's how
it's
do you find it?
you
Um,
said
the thing
100%.
that I was going to say, like in a future sort of cyberpunk futuristic view,
Mm.
everything will be on the chain. Anyone can create smart contracts because people are using AI to develop the code.
Yeah,
People are not investing anymore to learn how to develop because now they've got AI doing that for them. But
yeah.
the person that really understands code, really can read it and maybe write it, those are the people that are gonna be the differentiators, right? Like code is gonna be really the law in the future in the blockchain, isn't it?
And I think there will be a lot of bumps in that road because there will be a lot of those, like the sort of vulnerability that allowed people to actually understand that the attacker code was vibe coded. Like, you're gonna have code bases done by AI that will not
Being hacked by
necessarily
AI.
they will be not necessarily be compatible with some of like those best practices, because we just be reading from a whole bunch of code bases, not necessarily be making a difference between what a solid or like a robust code base is from what a non-robust code base is. And there will be a lot of people kind of like launching, I guess, financial applications effectively kind of like on chain using vibe coded smart contracts, and then a whole bunch of retail and other players using those because they will be offering whatever incentive mechanisms, and then a lot of people will get eventually hacked by either AI or combinations between AIs and people that actually is just saying like know how to code and probably also know how to hack some of those contracts. So yeah, it's gonna
Because the
become
truth is, the best vibe coder is the vibe coder that understands what he's vibe coding.
absolutely 100%.
You know, like, and this is gonna be the future. Like, if people are creating smart contracts with AI, there is like, even if you configure it well, there is a platform that has been built for that uses the best practices. You're creating something that you don't fully understand, and maybe it's really, really fucking secure, but then you're going to have someone in the other side that really understands, has the knowledge, and also has the LLMs and the AI
Mm,
that knows how to build. So if they know how to build, they are a lot closer to knowing how to hack, with the creativity of the person that understands code and smart contracts on the top trying to hack something. So it's going to
100%.
be a really interesting world to live in.
Yeah, if you can rag well, like an agent that is a very very awesome hacker, um, that agent is gonna be creamy. Like,
And that's the other thing. You don't need to be targeting and spending hours trying to hack a smart contract. You might have a bunch of agents running 24/7, and I can have like 1,000 agents trying to hack one smart contract with different IP addresses from different places, making changes in the code, or 1,000 agents trying to hack 10 different ecosystems at the same time. Like, it's it's
100%.
it's nuts. It's nuts.
And
I
using
hope that doesn't happen.
in using things like, I guess, privacy protecting kind of like tools like, tornado caching and all that kind of stuff within the whole flow.
Yeah,
So
so it's like, I'm hacking, I'm sending through Tornado Cash, putting in another wallet somewhere, and you
you
have no idea
you
who
have,
hacked, where it came from, where the money went to. It just disappear in the wild, wild west of the web.
yeah, and then that using again like this hacker here, use the funds, the proceeds of the hack to feed the the AI based hackers to do all the exploits and deploy all the contracts. So
Oh man.
for new exploits. I mean, I guess we probably could see that positive on both ways, because at the same time that it will be hackers doing that kind of stuff. I'm hoping that there is also
Security people doing the
security
same.
people doing the other side of the trade, kind of
Yeah,
like trying to deploy those AIs to white hack
yeah,
effectively, and trying to notify through bug bounties and all that kind of stuff. Different protocols have, hey, you're creating some sort of like honeypot. There are X, Y, and Z vulnerabilities here that could be exploited. I have exploited them, but then they return the money, of course, as part of their flow.
do you think the stuff that I'm saying is already happening, or do you think that
I think
that's
there's
sort
already
of
happening. I think there's already
futuristic? Yeah.
happening. I talked to some, and that's been already more than a year now. So it's almost happening on the white hacker side. It's almost happening to a level that is becoming too cumbersome for protocols to manage.
Mm.
So about a year ago, I was talking actually to a security guy, and he was saying that since the code within OpenAI and Anthropic and all that kind of stuff had become better,
Mm-hmm.
the bug bounty programs, which for those that don't know, a bug bounty is effectively when a protocol or a company sets up different levels of criticality on a code base, and then essentially with a promise to pay a white hacker, so someone that actually hacks just for the
For
for
finding the
security,
vulnerabilities. Yeah.
for finding vulnerabilities. So the what I was actually talking to the security person, saying like it's becoming really hard for a protocol to actually deliver bug bounty programs back to actual good white hackers, because they were being spammed by AI generated vibe coding bug hunters. Right? So there was a bunch of bug hunters that had just kind of like vibe coded or just put AI to try to find. But a lot of the vulnerabilities that were being found by those AIs, they were not critical, but they were occupying the time of the protocols that were trying to essentially split up what was actually a very good, I guess, white hacking.
Reviewing all the results.
Review all of the submissions from the ones that actually really had critical levels of security that the protocol teams actually had to deal with more urgency. They were having a hard time kind of splitting the two and actually paying the bounties for those that actually are really finding critical things, rather than the ones that are actually finding like low-level vulnerabilities just because it were based off like some generic kind of like AI vibe coded base. So that's already happening. And I would say it probably will happen more. So if there is a human in the loop like trying to review that, it's going to become harder for the human in the loop to actually split them out. Right?
Yeah. Interesting times ahead, my friend.
It's but anyway, so if there's anyone like I guess in the community kind of that is following in the balancer, I think we haven't seen yet the end of the story on this one. At the moment, there's quite a bit of work that has been done by the security firms on cross-protocol problems that might have kind of like more like systemic risks. So has the balancer V2 hack impacted other third-party protocols, and to what extent? So there's a bit of work still on the way in that sense. And kind of like protocols and interfaces that actually used to connect with the balancer V2. But so far as I can see, the other versions of the protocol haven't been directly impacted.
And hopefully it won't. Hopefully
Yeah,
they
hopefully,
can
and
find out
hopefully
what
it
happened.
won't. I think for the team behind Balancer, but the team is very has been very distressed by this one.
So if you have listened to the whole episode, write in the comments, solidify my solidity.
Awesome. And Andre, anything on your in your world like last few days or?
Lots going on. AI is a moving beast, but we'll cover that in our next episode next week.
Yeah, next time we can cover some of the AI bubble that is actually spreading to the world.
Yes, I'm concerned about my investments, but that's a conversation. Oh, maybe that's a good topic for next time.
For next time. Yeah.
Let's talk about investments in the high tech business, AI businesses.
In AI businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, tech companies, tech giants. All right. See you
Awesome.
next time, my friend.
Thank you. Bye bye.